Hello, world, and welcome to this episode of the RONJIRU Japan podcast. Have you ever wanted to come to Japan? Have you ever wanted to study in Japan? Have you ever wanted to learn Japanese? Have you ever wanted to maybe do business in Japan or maybe even work with startups in Japan? If the answer to any of those questions is yes, you're going to enjoy this episode. Our guest today has done all four of those things. Loretta Scott, also known as KemushiChan, is an entrepreneur, a very successful entrepreneur, and also one of Japan's very famous YouTubers. She joins us today to talk about, all four of these issues: strategies for learning Japanese, strategies and thoughts about living in Japan, working in Japan, and being involved with startups in Japan. You're gonna love it. Our guest is Loretta Scott. I'm your host, JT, and this is RONJIRU. Let's discuss Japan. Loretta Scott, thank you for joining us on the RONJIRU Japan podcast. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, JT. Hi.
Hi. It's been really nice to contact you and try and get you on the show. And you're very busy. We'll talk about that in a moment. Yes, exactly. But I do want to read out something because this is too much for me to have actually memorized. So I'm going to read this out. You are an amazingly talented entrepreneur. You're also one of Japan's very, very famous YouTube creators. You're a professional interpreter, translator, graphic designer, language instructor, self-employed business owner, plus you do marketing and digital branding. Loretta, you can code. Is there anything you're not particularly gifted at? Because I'm feeling intimidated already, and we just started.
Clearly, making a decision is my weak point.
Very nicely done. I see. Yes. I generally start out with the same question for each of my guests, so I'll ask you the same question.
Yeah.
How did you first get interested in Japan, and when was that? Or what was it about Japan that got you interested? Off to you.
Okay, so time to reveal my age. No, I'm just kidding.
Yes.
No. So basically, I was from originally Virginia on the East Coast of the States, and I was very close to Washington, D.C. So I was in a high school, actually, that had a kind of funky language program where they were really interested in getting kids into like critical languages. So at my school, obviously they had like Spanish and French, but they really were pushing for the kids to try either Chinese, Japanese, or Korean.
You see.
And I had just about the same time figured out that the rarest Pokemon cards were the ones that were still only written in Japanese. That's what the guy at the import store said. So I was like, okay, well, clearly, if I'm going to win at this game, I'm going to have to learn some of this language so I can get more cards.
I see.
So that was like the initial. So
you're a Pokemon girl.
I was. So that was like the foot in the door. But then after that, I made friends. When I was doing the actual program at my high school, like an actual Japanese friend came to do study abroad, and she was in the marching band with me. So, we nerded out and played instruments, and I realized here comes the age part. This was over 20 years ago. And the only way to keep in touch with people back then...
I have a calculator.
Yeah.
I have a calculator.
Boop, 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 boop. No,
yep.
The only way to keep in contact with people back then was a Mixi account, which you had to be in Japan to have. Didn't have one of those yet.
Right.
Or to write letters. So I figured I had to learn how to write and read as well. So that's really what got me like gung-ho about learning Japanese.
Pokemon.
And ever since, it's been like a slippery slope of just I can't stop learning more. It's just so much fun and really rewarding.
Right. Well, what was it that brought you to Japan first after having got all the Pokemon in the whole school?
I would have to say being really chatty and that friend. because as soon as I met her, I was like, oh, I've got to see this country. I am obsessed. And I was talking to literally anybody and everybody about, one day I'm going to go to Japan and I'm going to meet my friend. We're going to have the coolest time. And one of my friends at my church actually was like, well, I actually, my aunt or something like that lives in Japan. So do you want to do a homestay with her? And I was, I was 16 and I was like, yes, done.
Yes, done, sorted.
Yeah, well, then there was a lot of like saving and working and, bootstrapping my way into a plane ticket. But yeah.
Well, I'm glad you're here. Welcome to Japan. You, if I'm not mistaken, are here on a mixed scholarship, or were here on originally.
I was, yeah.
Could you talk about that? What is a mixed scholarship? I think a lot of my audience might find that interesting.
Yeah, so this is the golden goose. Like, this is like the golden grail that somehow did not get any clout outside of the kind of Asian side of things. But basically, it's a scholarship from the Japanese government where they're trying to basically infuse Japan's education and work environment with foreign talent.
Right.
So what they do is they vet different types of students at different levels, anywhere from university to, post-grad, et cetera. And they have them go to these like true blue national universities and pay for the whole thing.
Wow.
Give you a stipend and expect you to become some sort of what they, kakehashi. They expect you to be the kind of go-between, like a micro-ambassador between your country and Japan. So it's an amazing scholarship. And when I first applied, this was from New York, there was like 2 other people who were applying, and it was one of those fax mail-in situations. And I think it was because it hadn't really been done yet. Most people thought, well, this is too good to be true, or that can't be right, or it's just too hard to get at. But it's a hard process. It takes about a year or so to go through the whole thing. But once you actually like bite the bullet and get through everything, you kind of land in Japan with like the easiest, like it's like the Willy Wonka ticket. Because what happens after that is it sets you up for so many great things. So like, obviously having things paid for is a huge bonus. But in terms of job situations or in terms of visa situations, a lot of the schools that they place you in they tick off 5 points in the like highly skilled professional visa, the coveted work visa. And for in the work situation, if you're at a job interview, a Japanese employer looks at this and says, I know this university, I know this university, you're one of us. And, it's like a Willy Wonka ticket. And yeah.
Would you say it's Willy Wonka more so than, for example, something like the JET program, which is also kind of Willy Wonka?
Yeah, so the JET program is great, but the thing that I found is that it kind of can pigeonhole you. So for a lot of situations, this just isn't JET, but when you come on a work visa, you kind of end up tunnel visioned because you have to, for the sake of your visa, stay within the realm, work for this company, and you usually can't do anything else outside of it. But when you come as a student, you have a lot more freedom to work with different people and et cetera. So for example, I did the MBA, like a business program. That's what I decided to do with my mixed scholarship. And what that did was, because I was doing case studies with actual businesses in Japan, I already had my foot in the door with so many different companies here before I even graduated. Like, these are guys who, if you go and say, hey, I want to talk to you as a person who already has a work visa, there's kind of like a barrier. It's like, okay, what does this guy want from me? Or even just a job interview. Sometimes getting a job interview is like, a pain in the neck, right? Yes. But when you're a student, Japan really respects students. Like, the same companies that would never give you an interview will let you do a case study. But then once they know you, then they'll let you do an internship, and then they'll, et cetera, et cetera. So it's kind of a sneaky back doorway.
Very clever of you.
No. This was all just like, literally, like I said, a slippery slope. It's like, oh, wow. Oh, that worked. So yeah, coming in, if you can come in as a student, and do something with that time to expose yourself to more entities, if you're interested in that, obviously. it really opens doors for you a lot more smoothly than trying to crowbar your way in the sort of traditional route.
Sure. So you got your MBA here in Japan, and you chose to get it here in Japan rather than any of the very many number of business schools in the United States.
Yeah, what's wrong with Harvard, right?
Right. What's wrong with Harvard? What was the rationale for that?
Honestly, the first thing was the money. That was, American education system is a little bit overexciting for my wallet at times.
I see. Very well put. Loretta, you're fun.
So it was basically this choice of, I knew I wanted to do something with Japan, and I wanted to do something that really allowed me to sort of get a deeper experience, because I know, like, looking from the States at Japan, I can make a lot of assumptions, or I can have a lot of ideas about, I'm going to do business in Japan. But until I have my physical boots on the ground, I don't really know the playing field. So I wanted to kind of really spend a few years getting to learn Japanese business from business people, from as many different, literally to research it. That was my goal, was to do research for my own research.
Right. I see.
So I was more interested in doing business in Japan than just doing business in general.
Yes.
Is the short answer, probably.
I guess. Yes. Not that short, but I get it.
I'm a talker.
That's why you're here. Was it a thesis-based MBA?
Yeah, so that's the thing.
What was your thesis?
So it's going to sound really ironic.
Okay.
It was our Japanese small and medium-sized businesses ready to do market entry in light of the Olympics? Or are they ready to expand in light of the Olympics?
I see.
So, yeah. The answer apparently was no. No.
It appears no.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have an answer.
Yes, a successful thesis with a bad answer.
No, it was actually that was part of the fun of the interview process. Back in the States, before I came here, there was a panel who vet your potential thesis, and basically they said, so your thesis is going to end in 2019. You're not even going to see the Olympics. How is this even impactful? Like, why the Olympics? Like, why are we supposed to give you a grant if you're not even going to see the Olympics by the time you write your what's it called, ketsuron, your final answer?
Yeah, thesis, yeah.
So, yeah, that was fun.
I guess. Well, so you graduated with your MBA. Congratulations to you. And it didn't take you long to found. Yeah, you're very welcome. It also didn't take you very long to found more than one startup. You startup junkie, as you say on Twitter. You have KemushiChan LLC.
Yeah.
As a company that you started a few years ago. What does that company do? Tell us a bit about that.
At the moment, it's in a pivot. So it's still, it's in a holding pattern right now, because I started that almost 10 years ago. This was actually an entity I started in the States to basically serve as a content creation machine and kind of like a consultancy for businesses that wanted to do market entry into New York. So originally, I would do anything from, and this is where all those many hats start coming in.
Right.
Anything from writing up pitch decks or going to conferences, doing sales, like whatever it would be. Usually there's an issue of so-and-so, like XYZ company can't be in front of the right audience. So I would either do the research or sell the research or do the actual like pitch or whatever. I really like companies or ideas and solutions when they're like 5 people big. So it was very interesting for me to sort of help companies do these sort of small seed level projects and then move on to something else. So a lot of project-based consultancy. And then on my own, obviously, I use this to do sort of like my own little create products or solutions for students. I like to do a lot of I would try to create different solutions, but most of those don't exist anymore because I moved here and had to shift my attention. But now, rather than do market entry into America, into New York, I'm now flipping it mostly because of those case studies that I did while I was doing like my MBA. And I'm helping more Japanese companies, or actually, it's not really flipped. I'm still working with Japanese companies that want to move into New York or move into outside of just the Japanese market. So a hodgepodge.
Hodgepodge, a lady of many hats.
I should have changed the name to Hodgepodge LLC.
Call you Hat Lady. You're also the founder of Japanscholar organization. Tell us about that.
So that one...
As if you're not busy enough.
Yeah. So this is a entity, basically, it's a matching service that puts students in front of scholarships that, bring them to Japan. And originally it was just educational scholarships. But then after that, it changed into like foundation grants, internships, just basically there are more creative ways to get to Japan than just study abroad in college. And that's actually how I found the MEC scholarship.
I see.
And that's actually what brought me here. So it was kind of like a funny.
So entrepreneur first and MBA second.
I guess.
You're a natural.
No.
Well, on your Twitter handle, you call yourself a startup junkie. So I'm assuming you're going to have a few more startups on your docket coming up soon. What are some of the big differences or major differences you've noticed between making a startup in the US and the way that startups function here in Japan?
A lot. I've seen a lot more of more like what I would call sandbox projects. Obviously, there are startups. There are startups everywhere. That's just what it is. But I found in Japan there are a lot more of little sandboxes within large companies, and then those will kind of like roll out. So they act like startups, but there's usually somebody really familiar at the top. Like there are only so many different companies. But whereas in the States, there's a lot more independent, and there's a lot more pitch culture and incubators, and like that was like my evenings after work were just go to these pitch contests and just like watch people like do this like exciting heartbeat of like self-made business and investors. So recently I've found there are more sort of incubator programs here in Japan, but a lot of them are government subsidized or, again, big corporate company sort of led.
Right.
So I would say, yeah, the biggest difference I would say here is that there's a lot of like big hands in the pot.
I see. Have you done a TED Talk?
Me?
You?
No.
No. Okay.
I was like, I've been invited to one, but I didn't make it. Next time.
You'd be brilliant. Okay, changing topics. You are a wildly successful YouTube creator with you're starting to approach 180,000 subscribers, which is just gobsmackingly amazing. Your videos are always the right balance between friendly and humorous, but also informative, because you talk a lot about Japanese language study and also cultural aspects.
Yeah.
Your camera work and editing is also great. So to my audience, I highly recommend anything by KemushiChan. Check out her YouTube channel.
Thank you.
Follow, subscribe, send her lots of emails.
I feel like I have to point whenever I hear these words.
Yeah.
Click below.
Click below. Well, it'll all be in the show notes. But Loretta, I gotta ask you.
Yes.
What the hell? KemushiChan? That means furry caterpillar. Where did that come from?
Where did it come from?
Why are you the furry caterpillar?
Oh my gosh. So, the answer I give recently is one day I'll be a butterfly. But you and I both know that the kemushi do not become butterflies.
No, they don't.
They
become
moths. They become moths.
Moths, yes. Yes.
And they're rather disliked in many places, but in Japan. But originally, when I found the name, it's because it was the first word I asked my Japanese teacher to like help me learn in Japanese, because I like to eat a lot. And I was, I had like a funny nickname, the Hungry Caterpillar. So I was like, okay, sensei, caterpillar, nan to imasu ka? How do you say caterpillar? And she was like, well, you have so many different ones. And not knowing what any of these actually were or looked like, I figured kemushi, like a furry caterpillar, that sounds cuter than like a wormy looking one, right?
Wormy looking one, yeah. I see.
And that just kind of stuck. And yeah, I mean, for Japanese people, it's just like, you can't forget it.
Very true. So it came from
Whereas my actual name is hard to say for Japanese people, so.
Yeah, an L and an R and a double T.
Sometimes I get called Rolex. I'm not sure. I'm on the fence if I like that or not. Loretta, Rolex. Like, it's like a very...
Oh, well, hey, high brand. That works.
So
that's the story. So it came from the fact that you like to eat. Yeah. And now...
Still do.
You still do. And now, but you also eat information and you eat startups. And so it's actually quite an apt name for you. Loretta, you also produce the audio tracks on your videos. When did you start producing music?
Oh, gosh.
I think I forgot to mention that at the start of this interview, but you also do that.
Yeah, not all of them recently. I really appreciate a good outsource recently. But when I first started, I started writing music, I want to say, like when I was like 8 or so. My dad's a sound engineer, so I grew up surrounded by instruments. And, this was when he had an old MIDI keyboard, and like my favorite time on like a Saturday was going to the Staples, the store, and buying different colored floppy disks, because that was the only thing you could save on back then.
Right.
And I was like, I have to have the bright orange floppy disk. And that was, I'd write music, and even took a course for it in college. That was really exciting. So yeah, film scoring. If I hadn't been a YouTuber and many other things, one of my original dreams as a kid was to be a Foley artist or a film scoring person.
Film scoring person, a technical term.
Clearly.
Yes.
Clearly
really?
An expert.
Well, I guess if your father was a sound engineer, you were surrounded by music and the various pieces of, at the time, what the software was.
Music, language go hand in hand.
Right. Different kinds of language. You were a pioneer in using YouTube for educational content.
Yeah.
The original YouTube was a whole bunch of people showing, cat videos and food, how to cook and all of that. But you turned it into educational content, and yet it was long before that was actually a thing on YouTube.
Yep.
Many people around the world want to learn Japanese. You kind of glommed onto that. Lots of your videos and other online platforms give hints and ideas on something that you call meta-learning strategies. If you had to boil down, let's say, all of the various meta-learning strategies into maybe 3 or so that you could say on the show, what would you say are the most important meta-learning strategies for people in my audience who want to learn Japanese and come to Japan? 3 helpful hints.
Okay. I would say short-term goals. Record yourself.
Record yourself.
Yeah, I'll explain that. And I'll stick to those 2, actually.
Okay.
The third one probably is rinse and repeat, to be honest. But so short-term goals, a lot of people look at Japanese, myself included, and go, oh my gosh, it's so much to learn, literally. And it clearly is. And if you just run at it head first, you're going to hit a wall and, get discouraged, etc.
Sure.
Obviously, textbooks are great. They're kind of like a map through this muddied water that we tread through. But at the end of the day, you're going to get frustrated if you don't see real progress. So when you make these short-term goals, not just I want to learn Japanese or I want to be fluent, if you actually sit down and say, I want to be able to cook XYZ recipe using a Japanese recipe by the end of this month. Or I want to be able to introduce myself and my favorite instrument by the end of this month, whatever it is. You have to make actual actionable goals on the side of this sort of linear learning so that you can really start learning applicable language that matters to you. And then for the second point, in terms of recording yourself, you have to be able, especially if you're a self-learner, you have to be able to see yourself objectively. So it's kind of like if you're into sports or anything like that, you can sit on the court dribbling a basketball as much as you want, but you're not going to learn about like what really is your weak points or like how you did on the actual game unless you've seen yourself play.
Right.
So, like you go to the gym, you see a picture of yourself, say, oh, wow, that was bad posture. Same thing with learning language. If you record yourself or if you start like looking at your old notes afterwards and you really see what you produced, then you start to say, oh my gosh, well, that was terrible. And then you start making real improvements. So record yourself specifically.
Right on.
And then rinse and repeat.
Rinse and repeat. You've also said in some of your videos or some of your interviews, I can't remember which one, that language comes alive when it's social.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know what you mean, and I agree with that. But we're unable to gather in groups anymore with coronavirus. And so what are some ways to make language learning social in the age of the coronavirus?
One thing right now that most people are actually doing is gaming, for example, playing different games.
Gaming? Oh,
yeah.
That's unexpected.
Yeah, I didn't think I would come up with that one either. So games now, a lot of them are really interactive. So you can obviously play by yourself, but you can also get into these like voice chats and things like that. And you can actually start interacting with people digitally. And it's a much more fun environment where, obviously an easier answer would be to say, get a tutor or hire a teacher. And that's great. But there's something different about when you're working like laterally with other people and you're all working towards something together and they say something and you're like, oh, I didn't know that word. Now it's new core memory. Like, you start logging all of these different utterances that you wouldn't get if you were just one-on-one trying to derive a certain language experience. So I find doing, for example, gaming or doing just like, there's like live streams on Twitch, like just like, if you want to produce content, people will interact with you, even YouTube. There are a lot of ways, a lot of Japanese people also that want to interact with language learners. So there are a lot of apps out there. You just have to be careful which ones you pick because sometimes it just turns into a dating app. And when, which may work out for you. But,
right. Another way to keep it social.
Yeah, another social element.
You've also talked a lot about the need for a focus on learning themes rather than memorizing vocabulary lists.
Yeah.
And I've learned languages myself. I'm a linguistics minor and all that. It is actually the way that they learn languages in Europe. And as you know, yes, they focus on themes and situational, terms or vocabulary, rather than a list of terms. So I thought that was, if you're interested in traditional onsen hot springs, you're going to need to learn a few of the phrases for your onsen hot spring. And you talked about that. I thought that was great.
It's like language learning is personal. So obviously everyone should probably learn how to order something at the restaurant or how to introduce themselves. But at a certain point, language has to be personal. So if you like to, skateboard, try to sing something about it in Japanese. Or if you like to do whatever it is, try saying something about it in Japanese. So
here's an idea for you, as if you're not already busy enough.
Bring it.
Tell me what you think. You could do a Livestream Zoom meeting where people can talk to you and ask you questions specifically about Japanese and how to learn it, and you could teach them the words on the. You could call it Conversations with KemushiChan.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Or how about
with the community?
Or Learning with Loretta or something like that.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
That'd be a great idea. I think there's a need for that. And there's so many people, there's so many people who are interested in Japan, but language is a barrier. I'm going to change topics again, Loretta. I have a question.
Yeah.
You can either confirm or deny.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, uh-oh. I heard a rumor that you're writing a book. Is that true?
I've always been writing a book.
I see. Very political answer. Can you tell us about it? Or not
too much in detail, but I would say in the next year, there will definitely be some new contents out there.
Does it regard or involve ferry departure announcements?
No.
Okay. All right. So that was a false rumor. Good. Okay. All right. That's good to know. I look forward to it. give me a ping when it's ready to be pre-ordered.
Of course,
Yeah,
of course.
let me know. Back to YouTube. Your videos lately appear to be moving a little bit away from Japanese language instruction and more towards what I would call daily life, travel videos.
Yeah.
You were just up in the north, scenic spots. If that observation is correct, what made you change your focus, the different or broader focus?
Yeah, so I'm going to be adding in a mix of different things, but this landscape on YouTube has changed a lot, and that most people obviously want to learn Japanese from a Japanese person. So my goal was never to teach people Japanese per se, but more or less to teach some strategies to help them learn Japanese so that they could have a rich or more informed experience. So now with these videos, where like I obviously there will always be a learning or education element to it, talking about strategies about how to fish your own Japanese fish, basically. But in terms of these sort of like lifestyles and these vlogs, my hope is that I want to show a non-translated experience. The videos obviously are translated because they have subtitles, but I want people to see when you learn Japanese to a certain level, you start to unlock different experiences, or you start to unlock, I didn't learn Japanese just to learn the letters. I learned it to meet with the people. And I want to share that my end goal to connect with amazing people and thus have an amazing, rich experience to show that.
Right.
I could tell people a million times that learning language is really rewarding, or I can just show it. So I'm trying to sort of infuse more instances where I can share, this is what happens when you learn language. And hopefully that excites a lot of young people. Wow, sounding older here already. But I really hope that excites a lot of students to do something a little bit more creative if they were thinking to do so already.
It preempts a question I was about to ask you later, but I'll come back to it in a moment.
Yeah.
Are you going to make a documentary?
I'd love to.
Oh, yes, I know
love
you
to.
would. I know you would.
Yeah, I have a couple. I'm like, I didn't realize this was the dream. Apparently, probably my not end goal, but a big goal would be to make like a Netflix style documentary.
I knew it.
But I'm waiting.
You're waiting.
That's like my not until all the pieces are in place, but it's definitely there.
There was that kind of a documentary, I guess you could call it a corporate video, I suppose, that you did, and I forget the municipality. It was I guess it was somewhere near Nagoya, and you were on a bicycle.
Yeah. That was it was around the like Toyota area.
Yeah.
The actual
Toyota.
Yeah. Yeah, it was around there, and just seeing like more like a deep dive, because Nagoya kind of gets a bad rap.
Yeah.
What do they say about it? It's like one of the most traversed cities where nobody gets off.
Right.
It's like the most famous transfer that nobody ever gets off at, or something like that.
Right. What is it? I guess it's the 4th largest city in Japan.
Yeah, it's huge, and it has
Tokyo, Nagoya, Osaka, and I think Nagoya is probably number 4.
Yeah, and there is just like so like hidden gems across the area, and there's a huge college town out there as well. I wasn't aware of this. A lot of students, they think they want to go to school in Japan, foreign students. They think they want to go to school around Tokyo or Yokohama just because that's what they know.
Yep.
But I found that the more successful and happy students went to school in like Sendai or Nagoya or places like that. So there's a lot of good, like great Google reviews on Nagoya, actually.
Right. Makes sense. How do you always stay so bubbly and happy? I don't think I've ever seen you never smiling, and it's quite addictive. But what's your secret?
Coffee?
Coffee?
No, I don't.
Coffee.
A good dark roast coffee. No, I don't know. It's just I get excited, naturally excited. That magical feeling when you finally use Japanese and somebody responded, and it's like, oh my gosh, I actually connected with this person. It wasn't just that textbook page. Like that magical Disney moment is like always inside. So for me, like when I talk about languages or when I use language, it's like that magic.
Sure.
So that's probably the smile.
I guess I know the feeling.
Yeah.
Although I don't smile as much as you do.
Well, there's usually oh gosh, why didn't I know that word? Did I say it wrong? Like, there's usually a sense of dread and a 3 a.m. haunting usually, but
it comes
still exciting.
It comes through very clearly in all of your videos.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, no, it's great. Changing gears again, you've been in Japan quite a while. So 2 questions related to that. In what ways has your opinion of Japan changed, now compared to when you arrived?
Yeah.
What's different? And maybe different in a good way, but also different in a bad way?
Yeah.
You could talk about that.
So on this current stint, I'm on my 5th year here in Japan, but I did a number of different like study abroad and research fellowships and stuff over the last 10 years or so. No, that's wrong. No, that's right. For about 10 years or so. And when I first got here, it was still kind of like coming off of the whole like bubble economy and everything. So there was still like, Japan was so like, bright and sparkly, and your dollar went, did it go very far? I can't remember. Yeah, I think that's when the dollar was a lot stronger, if I remember the first time I came here. But anyways, so it was just, it really felt like a land of opportunity. But now, about 10, 15 years later, I have found that Japan doesn't necessarily need as much foreign talent as they say they do. And it's a lot more saturated. So, if I had come here 15 years ago ready to do the work that I'm doing now, I think I would have made even more of a splash and had so much more. Like, I've had a relatively great and easy time, but I've found around me that a lot of people, like the job markets, this year is obviously an outlier, but the job markets are completely like oversaturated, and there are more Japanese people. For example, the kikoku shijo, the kids who come back after growing up abroad, they're all back home now after the bubble, and they're all grown up and they're working too. Or all the kids who are learning, people say Japanese people have terrible English. Not anymore. Like, that stereotype actually isn't that true anymore. And it's very competitive now, because just being able to speak Japanese isn't really enough anymore, is a huge observation.
It comes with experience of the way the rest of the world manages itself.
Yeah.
Too.
And, that's great for Japan. And so, I mean, if anybody is watching and they're like trying to move to Japan, I would say back in like early 2000s, 90s, if you had just a major or you spoke Japanese, that was enough to do really well. But that is really not the case anymore. And even the idea of a Japanese major, throw it out. Like, you can obviously do the Japanese major, but what you really need to succeed here, if that's what you're looking for, is obviously a second or a third skill set, a marketable actual skill. And the things that do really well in Japan, and I'm sure you know this as well, JT, obviously there's obviously legal, obviously finance. These are like kind of like the big expat realms.
Sure.
Software engineering, IT, that's huge now, but it's really competitive. And but then there are other things that
you can code.
Yeah, well, I try not to code. I try to outsource. But yeah, just things like IT and what is it? Another thing is like the patent world. That's still legal, but like the patent world is huge still. There are different ways you can break in that way, but you gotta add in a second skill, even if it's like graphic design. I say that like it's small, but even graphic design will do very well for you here in Japan. Logo design, art, etc. So, yeah, it's changed.
It's changed. How has your opinion of Japan changed the better your Japanese gets? And I asked that second question because, and I'd love to hear your opinion or any anecdotes on this.
Yeah.
I think it's important for anyone who's interested in coming to live in Japan to know that you talked about a second skill set or a third skill set or fourth skill set, whatever.
10th.
But the first skill set absolutely has to be Japanese. If you want to understand Japanese people and Japanese society in any depth, not just shallow, anime or facade of, I ate sushi. If you want to understand Japan in any way, excuse me, Japanese language for me is essential. And I found the better I get, the closer I get. And I just wanted to hear your experiences on that, since you are the Japanese teacher of record on YouTube.
I completely agree with you there. Yeah, it's you got to learn the language first, but also you also need to keep learning while you're going. So it's a constant uphill battle, a fun one.
Fun one, yes.
And I don't know if my opinion has changed all too much, other than, on the smallest, lightest level, I really like the countryside in Japan.
Mm-hmm.
And
it shows in your videos.
Like, I used to think, oh gosh, I've got to live in Tokyo. I've got to be it's got to be in Tokyo because that's where all the anime happens. But now recently I'm like, no, it's got to be in the countryside because that's where all the people happen. Like, that's where all amazing, interesting people. Like, you'll find some of your best stories outside of the big cities. So
and
I highly recommend.
And most people come to the big cities.
Yeah.
Yes, I guess that's where the airports are, but I guess so. Your piece that you did on the northern city there that was getting prepared for the Olympics.
Yeah.
That was an interesting piece. How long did that take you to make?
About a month from start to finish. I filmed that in the end of February, I want to say, and then it was up by the very last day of March. So yeah, about a month from start to finish. That was a doozy.
Yeah.
There was a lot of sound recording and stuff, so I was trying to up my game.
Well, your game has been upped.
Yeah. Thank you.
Japan does have, compared to, let's say, North America or parts of Western Europe at least, it still has some social issues that need addressing here. A long way to go in some ways. But that's in some ways why I find it important that people who want to come here and live here learn Japanese.
Yeah.
Because in order to understand the way that things are, you have to be able to understand the way that things are.
Yeah.
And then, and only then, can you form an opinion on the way things should be.
There's definitely, I would say, there's definitely a easy tendency to make sort of swooping realizations about Japan. That's like, if you learn any Japanese in college, for example, there's those textbook topics of declining birth rate and the aging population and the bullying at school. It's like everyone writes the same 3 papers, but they're actually kind of outdated. And in terms of the modern version of that is everybody's on Twitter complaining about the same 3 things. But I don't say much about it, but when I watch these sort of interactions, I've noticed a lot of people are wrong or actually regurgitating information that was mistranslated. Like a lot of things are getting lost in translation, and people aren't able to really form meaningful opinions. And anyways, us complaining in English about something about a country that isn't, it's just an echo chamber anyways. So if you want to actually, if you actually cared, you'd learn the language and you'd talk with people here. So
that's a perfect summary of what I was trying to get at. Yes, I'm glad you agree with that.
That's my 2 yen.
That's your 2 yen. All right. All right. We're getting close to the end of your time, and I appreciate your time. So I have a couple of just sort of last questions to finish up with. As a person who discusses a range of topics, both in person on interviews like today, but also on your YouTube channel. If you had one thing about Japan that you wish everyone around the world knew more about, what would that be? Like I said, it doesn't have to be one thing, but one is easier than 0.
Wow.
I didn't say my last questions were easy. I just said they're the last questions.
Ooh, this is like, oh gosh. Like,
people know anime and manga. They know sushi. They know the name of Ichiro, the baseball player. Those are all aspects. Some of them are subculture.
Yeah.
But as somebody who doesn't live in subculture, who lives in the culture, I guess.
Okay, this will sound really like random, but I would say as like this is like the startup junkie side of me coming out. I would say, honestly, I wish people knew more about the architecture and engineering side of Japan.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So Japan is will like to push a certain image abroad, and a lot of it revolves around like robots and healthcare and things like that. But I have found like Japan's strongest industries and the ones that they don't really talk about all that much is their ability to make things and engineer solutions, like actual like physical solutions to things. Like for example, if you're wearing anything with a zipper on it, there probably is something on it YKK.
YKK, yes.
Yeah, and like most people don't realize that's because like that's the zipper that like the entire world loves. It's not glamorous, so people don't know about it. But there's so many little things that like Japan's really like reliable little solutions like run the entire world, but nobody actually knows about that. So when I was north in Yamagata, in the recent video that we were talking about, just the way that they cleared the snow. Like I was, who is the snow engineer? I need to know who is the like weather technician out here, because it wasn't like nasty plowed snow with nasty brown piles on the side. It was perfectly carved like tunnels that you drive and walk through. Like the sidewalks were like perfectly carved, and there's no ice on the ground. Whereas where I grew up, if it snows, there's ice for like 3 years, and you're slipping and breaking your back. Like, you know, so I was like, these are simple solutions. Even, for example, everyone's starting wearing a mask over the last year. And Japan immediately had a spray that you spray on your glasses so your glasses don't fog up. And the rest of the world is still figuring out how to like eat with their like foggy clouds. It's like, these are the simple solutions that just make life so much better. Like, you know, we talk about automation in Japan a lot, but I'm like, it doesn't have to sound that glamorous. Like, Japan does automate, just not the things we think it does. And I wish those were the things people knew more about.
Do you know about ball bearings?
In what sense?
Ball bearings are essential for anything that spins.
Okay, yeah.
So tires, wheels, tractors,
everything.
Cars, factory, automation machines, everything that spins. Anything that spins needs ball bearings.
Yeah.
And there's basically, I mean, this is kind of an exaggeration, and I know it is.
Yeah.
But there's basically one company that has almost the entire share of the world's ball bearings. It's a Japanese company, and their ball bearings are so tiny and so absolutely perfectly formed that they're the perfect ball bearings, which is why they've got a big share of the market. Yeah. There's other companies out there who do the same thing, but there's this one Japanese company that has just an absolutely shocking share of the world market on ball bearings. Right? That's kind of what you're talking about.
Exactly. And that, like, those things really fascinate me and excite me, because it's like, even just as like a student standpoint, I didn't realize this, that some of the best schools in Japan are their engineering schools, and even like their architecture, you know, like just having like earthquake proof, etc., or, you know, earthquake sensors that also help you find the best surfing when you're out at the beach. Like just all these little solutions that Japan is so good at, that are actually like the heartbeat behind your everyday.
Sure.
That people just really don't get. And, you know, America is kind of the opposite. Everything falls apart. And like you almost would never buy something seriously from the dollar store unless you expected to throw it away. Whereas like everything that you get in Japan, even if it's just a dollar value, is just like designed perfectly. And I'm just like, those are the things, like the design and the engineering is so cool. But yeah, okay, nerding finished.
Yeah, no, that's great. I'd like to get some of those people on my show as well.
Yeah.
What is Japan to you?
Ooh, like my Robin Hood, my life savior, basically. Like, I don't know, Japan has really, I lucked out, I should say. And, you know, sometimes you talk to Japanese people and they say, oh, you're really more Japanese than American. And that's all talk. But there is an element where I really feel that something clicked, and there's definitely a part of me that feels home in Japan or in the Japanese sphere and with Japanese people. So that doesn't mean it's all, you know, rainbows and unicorns. Like, I butt heads with a lot of people here. But I really think Japan has led me down a more fun and successful life path than if I had just become the Foley artist in Virginia that I thought I would be as a kid. So,
right on. What's next for Loretta Scott?
What is next?
Maybe I should rephrase the question.
Yeah.
What isn't next for Loretta Scott?
Right? I'm like, oh gosh, there's a lot. I want to start, you know, just building more brands here in Japan. It's different when you're in Japan, because when you're home in your home country, it's actually not that hard to start a business. I mean, maybe coming up with an idea or something like that, but the actual logistics of starting a business is not that difficult. Whereas in Japan, it's a lot difficult. It's a lot more difficult. And so I haven't been able to sort of launch as many things as I want to here, but looking forward, that's like, I want to launch a couple new ideas. Just leave it at that. And, you know, I'm starting to, I've seen the landscape for a while. I'm excited to, you know, start a family soon and have their language journeys begin as well. So that's too exciting. I guess my babies, both professionally and personally.
Biologically.
Yeah.
Well, I wish you all of the best of success with all of your endeavors.
You too. Thank you.
Keep me posted. You are welcome back on RONJIRU Japan. Absolutely anytime for any reason. Just give me a mail and you'll be here.
Yeah.
I want to say thank you very much for your time today. I've enjoyed the conversation. I think my audience will enjoy the conversation, and it's quite encouraging for those who want to learn about Japanese language learning, but also want to come here someday. I think there was a lot of good insights. Insights on Japan from people who know Japan. So we've done our job today. Done. Thank you very much, Loretta.
Thank you for having me, JT.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Bye for now.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thanks for joining us on the RONJIRU Japan podcast. For more insights on Japan from people who know Japan, be sure to subscribe to the podcast right now and check out our website at www.ronjirujapan.com. That's www.ronjirujapan.com. Links to all our content are on the website and in the description for this episode, including links to Facebook and Twitter and our YouTube channel, which also has a variety of videos in addition to regular episodes. Please subscribe, follow, and share. I look forward to talking to you again in the next episode. From RONJIRU Japan in Tokyo, I've been your host JT. Until next time, o genki de ne.